This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
Thanks for tuning in to Power Athlete Radio. Brad Snyder joins us on this week's holiday episode, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because this Naval Academy grad turned Paralympic Gold Medalist has an amazing story. After several deployments as an EOD officer, his last with the Navy SEAL team left him blinded. Brad suffered a blast to the face after stepping on a buried IED. Although his facial injuries healed in relatively short order, his eyes were damaged beyond repair. Hear how Brad was able to pivot and take his personal drive and Type A personality in a different direction by revisiting his passion for swimming. A collegiate competitor, Brad is no stranger to training, setting goals, and exceeding them. He relies on his positive mindset and vigilant approach to maintaining perspective as a means to dominate not only the sport of swimming, but also the challenges of navigating life as a blind man. This is episode 135.
Yo, Power Athlete Nation, what is happening? Welcome to another episode of Power Athlete Radio, the premier podcast in strength and conditioning. This is Denny, and I feel like it's been fucking weeks since I spoke to you guys. I'm excited. I'm joined with John, Luke, and Tex, and our guest today is Mr. Brad Snyder, Paralympic swimmer, gold medalist, motivational speaker, this all-around badass. Brad, thanks for taking the time to talk shop with us, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Before we get going, I wanted to kind of touch base with my boys, Luke and Tex, and see how the past weekend went.
Oh, Denny,
I know.
You missed out, dude.
It was amazing.
It was raining men.
Actually, what we did is
elevator pitch. 60 seconds. What did I miss?
Well, Denny, that's why
Dr.
my voice
Tom.
is. Well, my voice is a little beat up because we had the 12 packs of Christmas, where we had to smoke 12 packs of Christmas every day leading up to the event. So it was a party.
No, you missed
Christmas.
Killer talks from Andy, from Rob, from John, and Dr. Tom. I thought Dr. Tom stole the show, but that's not to detract from Rob or Andy or John.
Yeah, he went full toe boogie. I mean, he started bringing, he showed up with 5 suitcases of technology about how you can put together a very simple protocol to pretty much fix anything that you have going on, from lasers and lights to this. I mean, the dude.
Yeah, full on. It was basically like a full-on performance and recovery clinic that you in your garage for 15 grand. Yeah. Which 15 grand sounds like a lot, but you can do everything from stimulate growth hormone to stem cell growth to. Dude, he has these crazy.
You could grow a third arm out of the small of your back if you really wanted to.
And then replace it onto,
And then graft it on other parts of your body. He went over supplements. I mean, Tom is, by far one of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to recovery, and one of the most advanced in the world in terms of blood testing and performance matrix. I mean, just, genius of a dude. And Denny, I think you've heard him speak before at the Knowledge Fest. Were you there at that one?
I was not.
Oh, well, you missed him twice then, dumbass.
He was also in Arizona. Were you at that one?
Yeah, he was actually in Arizona. Were you at that one? So that's 3 times you missed him.
The only time I've got a chance to speak with Tom is when we had him on the show.
Oh. Well, and there was not much speaking other than him just going completely off the reservation. But that he was great. Andy came up and gave a talk on goal setting and leadership that was so spot on that I almost took a step back, and I was like, oh my God, that was, I just didn't, I've known Andy for years in a lot of different settings, and to hear him really go through goal settings and talk about, as a SEAL and then also as a BUDS instructor, talking to the kids who made it and those who didn't, and then being able to kind of put a cohesive understanding of why people succeed in the face of these incredible challenges was really, really enlightening. And also, I felt like I learned tremendous from that. And then, of course, Rob Wolf, who is always, right there on the cutting edge. And so he came in and talked about, food performance and, what they're doing with specialty health. And we could not have asked for better presenters. And then I got up there and hacked it up.
No, John dropped knowledge bombs as usual, and just on what he's been meditating on for the definition of athleticism and opportunity. And offline, he's been talking to tons of people about their experiences as a child and upbringing, and where did they find that they finally exceeded or reached that higher level of athleticism.
Yeah, I've been, my little vanity project lately has been interviewing different people that have succeeded at, some phenomenal things, and just really going back and talking to them about how they were raised and what things are most influential and how they kind of got to where they are. I mean, unfortunately, when we hear about athletes doing great things, we always hear about their accomplishment today. We don't necessarily hear about the lead up, and how they got there. And and the people I really enjoy speaking to are people that are, outside of my generation. Like, I had a great chance to talk to Coach Bergner and Tom Furman and a bunch of different people, and just listening about how they grew up and, things that were important to their family, and kind of how, just the opportunity to really do things was presented at a young age, and it kind of really grafted into some really neat things. And it's just, unfortunately, as we become more advanced and there becomes more information at our fingertips, we sometimes lose sight of some of the most basic kind of anecdotal kind of things. And that was really my deal, to reach back and talk to some people. Like, I got a great chance to talk to Bergner, and he was talking about at 6 years old, he had a 4-ton shotgun, and part of his deal was he had to go out and hunt birds to not only get rid of the birds that were eating all their crops, because he grew up on a little farm in Illinois, but also to bring them home. So his dad would give him a shotgun and a bunch of shells and say, all right, I'll see you back here in 4 hours. I need X amount of birds. And so he'd go out there and shoot birds. And he talked about, walking out in the wilderness as a 6-year-old kid with a shotgun, how it was just normal. And that was just part of the deal. And now you think about today, if they found a 6-year-old kid out in the woods shooting birds with a 410 shotgun, CNN would be called, there'd be helicopters, child services would come, and there would be this, how could you allow our children to do this? And it's pretty amazing. And, that the farther I think we get to where we're going, the farther we forget about who we are. And really, a big part of this stuff is being able to empower, whether our kids to be, self-support or supportive, but also to, be able to go out and accomplish things. And so I think, as us in this kind of computer generation, we have this idea that we can kind of program everything, and we can kind of sit behind and really be these, kind of masters of the galaxy, and more important, like the Wizard of Oz in a lot of ways. Whereas sometimes you just have to provide opportunity and kind of step back. And I think that was one of the most interesting things for me, especially talking to, Tom Furman. We had him on the podcast. We had such a great talk offline about, Charles Bronson and how he grew up, and some of the kind of fringe athletes that we're not really familiar with, like the kettlebell guys in Russia, and how they've trained and how they kind of grew up in these different situations. So it's been an interesting project, and really enlightening for me as, not only having 2 kids, but one on the way. So now all of a sudden I'm sitting back and being like, what do? Do you not do anything? Or you just provide the playing field and then push them out there and hope to God they just kind of take like a duck to water to it. So it's been cool.
And then how can we forget Tex unveiling just a fraction of his opus with his opportunity model that you and him collaborated on, and then our lunge practical, where everyone was just blown away at their inability to lunge. It was
it's because as a not only it's a training style that most people are coming to us from, is all about hinging.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's something
that
was definitely apparent.
We've
and quad dominance. I mean, unilateral quad dominance and just imbalance.
What is that? What it all was? Just a
bilateral quad dominance,
or an inability to keep a neutral spine.
Well, it's if you and if you were here for the athleticism talk, I mean, we talked about most of what we do within this kind of functional fitness, functional model, if you want to say, and I fucking feel like setting myself on fire and saying that out loud. But really, in the training styles, whether you look at what most people are propagating as what they call athletic training or functional training, everything's a form of hinging at the hip. And it doesn't matter if it's a squat, it doesn't matter if it's a front squat clean, Olympic lifting, Olympic movements, gymnastics movements, everything involves some form of hinging. And when we went back and took a look, I mean, hinging is just one aspect of the primal movement patterns that we've established for the lower body, and that ability to take a step and lunge, which is really the initial step, from a hinge in terms of athleticism. Like think about a linebacker playing in the universal athletic position, ball gets snapped, he takes a step, and that ability to get into a unilateral movement pattern is completely overlooked. And people don't, they just almost look at it as secondary. Well, all I have to do is just squat. And if I squat, and, and part of that comes from Rip. I mean, Rip was like, well, all athletes need to do is squat. Well, that's true. If you're talking about beginning athletes who can't squat, but once an athlete demonstrates a squat, like how do you progress these movements? And for all sport, you have to be able to progress into some form of unilateral movement. So, but then you have all these other guys like the Eric Cressey's of the world and SAM and all this, where it's like, oh, it's only about unilateral movements. All we do is teach a Bulgarian split squat. But then we have a great talk with Stu McGill where he says, those guys have done more good or more harm than good, because the constant torquing of the hips in the unilateral deal has basically loosened up the hip sockets, and now he's seeing all these different problems within the hip and the low back from people doing too much of that. And so, how do you find this perfect balance between, not only hinging, lunging on that Y and Z axis, on the iliac crest, horizon changing. So we've sat back, and Tex has done an incredible job of putting this together and not only teaching the finer points, but how do you blend them together to really create this thing that we call athleticism, which in the talk, I mean, we haven't necessarily launched the talk publicly. I've just done it twice, and it's the idea of what I call the athleticism continuum, which is this never-ending continuum of trying to develop athleticism, because there isn't a single person, even the worst athlete we've seen, has some semblance of athleticism that can be improved by using this model and these tools we've put together to try to develop their athleticism, and it's just really never ending. And I think,
and on the converse, the best athletes have opportunity for improvement. And I think what is fascinating about the continuum is pushing that boundary has no adverse effect on performance, or longevity, well-being. Whereas in contrast, the fitness continuum has a sweet spot, because you go too far, and what happens, Denny? You start to implode, right?
Well, and Rob made a great point. Rob created that, in CrossFit.
Health and wellness continuum.
Yeah, the health and wellness continuum. That was Rob's
sickness.
Much like most of the early CrossFit, I mean, even the GPP term was, if you go back and look at the original message boards, Rob was, when they first were talking about this idea of fitness and training, Rob's like, you mean GPP, like the Westside guys? And that was kind of really the first kind of avenue that CrossFit took down that kind of road. And, if you go back and read all, I mean, they might have scrubbed it all out, but it still exists in some median. And really that kind of sickness, wellness, health continuum. And Rob, I know when he heard my talk, made the point, he's like, geez, I never realized that fitness was a cup and athleticism was a never-ending continuum, because you can always be working to develop your athleticism, even the best athlete on the planet. And one day maybe we'll have a power athlete games that's the search for the most athletic person on the planet. And
John,
I mean, but that would be pretty amazing. but think about it. I mean, that would be, I mean, it's pretty much Ninja Warrior. Because
they already have it.
Yeah, they already have it. It's called Ninja Warrior.
No, MXC, the most extreme elimination challenge.
Dude, when I watched Ninja Warrior, like that one guy who finally, that rock climber dude that finished it, I was like, he might be the most athletic person on the planet. But that idea of working to develop athleticism, and I think, when you look at fitness, you can become more fit without never moving your feet. You can put your feet flat on the ground in a closed chain bilateral hip hinge, and you can squat up and down, pull, I mean, do all these things, and you can basically create a more fit person
in your living room.
In your living room, anywhere. So I mean, that's why I think it's become such an explosion in terms of this idea of fitness. And while extremely important, just like strength is and fitness and all these different elements of I guess physical adaptation, but at the end of the day, the pinnacle for us is how do you combine all these things into a seamless symphony to really be able to demonstrate athleticism. And the coolest part is athleticism is really not even quantifiable, in that it when you see it. It's one of those things that's like a truth. You see somebody do something, you see him take a step off the curb and sprint across the street, or you watch him in the gym, and instantly you get this, like, we're programmed to see it in a way. You're like, oh, you're really athletic. What did you do before this? Oh, you're a gymnast. Oh, you played this. I mean, it's always something. But one person I've ever met said, well, I've never really done anything before this. And I was like, really? Because you're really athletic. You could have done something really nice. I mean, the fact that this is your first entree into training or entrance into training is sad, but I think to really develop that and then be able to put it to a test where you're competing against another person or in a grander scheme is really the what we're looking for, and I think the best celebration of those talents.
I still find myself constantly trying to explain the difference between increasing your work capacity and what athleticism is. There's still those who confuse the two. Increasing your work capacity turns you into this athlete, this natural, or not a natural athlete, but it makes you more athletic in almost any given endeavor. And I'm constantly trying to explain what work capacity really is, and then what athleticism is. So I'm glad that Power Athlete took that approach and took the challenge to kind of go down that rabbit hole and explain to everybody the difference, do the research, put the information out there, and really kind of put it out there for everybody to learn and understand.
I think two of the biggest takeaways from this weekend that I had, number one was essentially goals and what's in between the ears that Andy talked about, and the second was the importance of competition and that platform to increase your athleticism. Essentially, you need that high level of stress to really reach and get even more coordinated, and that opportunity to use your strength, your power, and your speed. So that competition platform, I'd kind of like to tie this back to Brad. And I read somewhere that tragedy is a gift because it forces us to find our purpose. So I want to kind of get into Brad's story. One of the big reasons we invited him here is just kind of talk about his experience and what we can take away from it. So if you want to talk about your journey, Brad, and just kind of get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement, tragedy is a gift. And there's kind of this concept that's out there a little bit now in the veteran world about post-traumatic growth as opposed to post-traumatic stress. I think that echoes my experiences big time. Through all of I had a very difficult couple years between 2009 and 2011, and I feel like the person I am now is just such a far cry from the person I was in 2009, and had everything to do with those difficult experiences. They taught me a lot about myself, they taught me a lot about the world, and they taught me a lot about how to handle those stresses, and they've really empowered me to do a lot of different things. You talk about work capacity and athleticism. What's the point of that? It's the ability to negotiate different challenges, whether it's moving a barbell around or saving a baby from a car or something along those lines. You want to be an athletic person because you want to be able to negotiate daily challenges. And a lot of times, just the global forces that we don't control enable us to figure out how we're going to survive in those environments. So, off of my soapbox or whatever, and I was an explosive ordnance disposal officer with the Navy for a period of about 7 years, and that's a fancy way of saying I was a part of the bomb squad, for the Navy. And I deployed once to Iraq in 2008, 2009, came back, and then was assigned to a SEAL team to become their subject matter expert in explosive hazards, and deployed to Afghanistan again in 2011. While I was in Afghanistan, I found out my dad had died, which was difficult, but kind of called into question, what's the purpose of things? What am I doing here, and what am I trying to accomplish? Kind of a purpose-driven kind of thing, and decided that I wasn't going to come home. I decided to stay in Afghanistan to serve with my platoon and continue to do the thing I was doing out there. And then in that fall, I stepped on an improvised explosive device buried in the ground while we were trying to help these two other Afghans who were hurt. And the blast knocked me backward. I got really lucky with the way that it hit me. It hit me really straight in the face, which you'd think would be bad, but my body was largely unharmed. I suffered some pretty bad blast damage to my face, but overall everything healed fine except for my eyes. So the lasting effect of my getting blown up basically was the fact that I had to figure out how to be blind. Shortly after, while I was in my rehab and recovery, there's a lot of resources out there for our wounded vet community, and one of those is being adaptive sports. Having a prior background in athletics and swimming, I swam all the way through college at the Naval Academy. They got me back into swimming really quickly. At first, I didn't really see the point. I didn't really understand why sports was going to be so important, but what I've learned through those experiences is that sports is such a great conduit for us to kind of, it's like a microcosm for the challenges of life. Like what we do on the fields, what we do in the weight room, what we do in the pool allows us to understand ourselves and how we're going to negotiate challenge. And for me, being able to succeed in the Paralympic realm allowed me to kind of rebuild my self-perception. You know, I used to be this real badass dude, like working with a SEAL team, taking apart bombs and all that sort of stuff. And now, you know, as a blind person, at first I was struggling to, you know, find the pork chop on my plate or find my way to the bathroom or put toothpaste on a toothbrush. Just stupid, idiotic, easy things were now a big challenge. And that really eroded at my perception of self. But being able to compete, to train, to work hard again, to eventually win in the Paralympic realm allowed me to rebuild that self-perception and taught me a lot about how to negotiate challenge. So, you know, in the years afterward, from those experiences, I've kind of adapted my vocation to be, how do I distill out of those experiences some ways to empower other people to negotiate daily challenge as well. Whether your challenge is, you know, the morning commute and, you know, the 9 to 5 that you find yourself in, or if your challenge is, you know, I just found out that I have cancer and I have to work through those challenges. I really truly believe, you know, the pillars of negotiating challenge are all the same. And the more we train and the more we work through like small challenges, it enables us to do the big things when life strikes. You know what I mean?
Could you dive further into those pillars of negotiation? I'm not too familiar.
I mean, I use the word pillars. They're like, these are all things that I've just kind of made up in my mind. But I think, you know, some of the biggest things that I've found that have helped me along the way are this idea of a positive attitude is a deliberate decision. You know, I'm a pretty positive and upbeat person, and I like to be smiling and joking around a lot. And that's not because I'm naive or stupid. I mean, I know the world can be a tough place, and I know that, you know, daily challenges out there. But I make a deliberate decision to be the one to be positive. Like you go to practice every day, and some people are bitching and moaning about, you know, being at the gym or being at the pool, and you don't want to be that person. Like every opportunity you have to be in the gym is an opportunity for you to get better. And the more that you buy into that concept and decide to make the most of that hour or 2 or 3 or however long you're in the gym, you know, that's going to empower you to make yourself better, to grow and to develop. So I think making the deliberate choice to be a positive person is one of the first things that has enabled me to succeed. The second thing is championing championing the community that we're a part of. So like when I woke up in the hospital, I wasn't there alone. I was there with my mom, my brothers, my sister, my teammates from college, the guys I deployed with. You know, there was a big community of people out there to help me and prop me up when I was down and get me going again. And I think that understanding that we function better as a community than we do as individuals is critically important. When I was standing on the podium in London with the medal around my neck, you know, with the anthem is playing, right, and the flag is being raised higher than all the other flags, and I recognized in that moment that the 50 stars and the 13 stripes on our flag represent something so much bigger than myself. I never would have been able to succeed in any of those realms had it not been for my coaches, for my family, for the teammates I had on deployment, for all these people who loved and supported me along the way. Like I'm a small cog in a big wheel, and recognizing that fact is really important in our eventual success. Individuals rarely attain true greatness. It's when communities band together, that's when real magic happens. I also use this idea, like, you know, we go through our lives, we interact with like hundreds and hundreds of people every day. You know, what were those interactions like? You know, like you had the opportunity, you went to Starbucks and got a coffee, or you went to the store, you went to Whole Foods and grabbed some grab whatever your groceries, and you have these kind of like transactional relationships with all these people along the way. The person behind the meat counter, or the vendor up at the front checking out your groceries. Most of us just blow through all of those interactions without ever even thinking about the fact that I was interacting with a human being, and that person has feelings and emotions and has a life of their own, and they're negotiating their own challenges. I try to go through life and recognize that I'm a part of that community, and I want to make sure that that person knows that I care for them and that like they're important to me. And this isn't merely a transactional relationship. This is, you know, we're all in this daily life of challenge. And I think understanding our part in a greater community is something that can, you know, lend to success on down the road. So I think those are probably the two biggest pillars, and there's a whole little other set of micro circumstances that are important, but those are the two biggest ones, I'd say.
So you mentioned a coach in that supportive community and network. I'm just curious how you got back into swimming once you went through this, and then kind of what lessons or kind of guidance a coach provided that really kept you on track?
Like I kind of alluded to earlier, like I didn't actually think that it was that great of an idea. I was actually still in the hospital, and I was going through blind rehab at the time, and blind rehab's like, I make the joke that's like Hogwarts for blind people. Like I was in a hospital as an inpatient down in Augusta, Georgia, spending all day like working with my blind cane to figure out how to walk, and like my talking phone and all that sort of stuff. And I got a call at that particular time, and this guy worked for the U.S. Association for Blind Athletes, and his job was to look through the list of military vets and find guys like me, and then offer up resources towards sports. And my initial reaction was like, oh yeah, sports will be fun. Like I definitely want to work out. It's a good recreation. I didn't see it as a way to like transform my self-perception and vocation and everything like that. So had he not have been persistent, I probably wouldn't have gotten into it. But he did all the legwork. He did all the logistics. It also happened to be that there was a confined time on it. Like I was injured in fall of 2011. If I wanted to be a part of the Paralympics at all, I had to get involved in February, like right away. You had to file all this paperwork. You have to get evaluated, yada, yada, yada. So I think it was his persistence that got me into it in the first place. And then it's just like, I think the biggest thing I got from coaches was just a challenge. Like I needed a challenge. When I was first hurt, there's so many people who are like coming out of the woodwork to be like, we're sorry this happened. We're really devastated that you're hurt, and we're sad, and we're sorry, we're sad, we're sorry. I hated the fact that, I'm used to being the one that's uplifting, or that I'm the strong one that everyone can depend on. I didn't like being the one that was bringing everyone down. I needed a challenge. I needed some way to show everyone that I'm going to be fine. And sports was that conduit. To be able to swim back and forth in the pool and do it really fast, people don't see me as struggling blind dude. They see me as, whoa, that dude's a pretty good swimmer. Like that's what I wanted people to see. And that's kind of the challenge that I was offered through coaching and the Paralympics as well. I find that that's pretty common in the wounded vet community too. Like one of the big things we're struggling at in transitioning the wounded vet world is they get locked in these idle, slow processes in the VA, and they're just sitting in their hospital room not doing anything. And everyone's handling them with baby gloves. Oh, you lost your leg. Well, you can't do anything now. Like you're pretty much stuck to this world as a disabled person, and you'll take on some benefit, and then you'll just sit and rot in your house. Like we need to find ways to challenge that population, because it shows that whether you're missing a leg, 2 legs, 3 legs, 4 legs, whatever, you're still capable of doing a whole lot of stuff. We just have to find a way to adapt and enable you to succeed and be challenged just the same way as everyone else. And that was the opportunity that was provided to me, and it set me on an amazing path.
I think this transitions well into my next question. So I've been working with a lot of private school kids and trying to create stress, or trying to create just this anger, this rage to get them to push and work hard. So I've been looking a lot into adversity, and from that research, I found this split between adversity and resiliency. And we talked a little bit about your take on adversity and resiliency before we got on air. So I'm hoping to kind of get into that.
Yeah. So I have thoughts on both words, and I think adversity is one of the most overused words in the English language. And I told you before the show started, like I watch Sports Center, and LeBron James is like, our team faced a lot of adversity this year. I'm like, I kind of roll my eyes at that. Like, adversity? What do you mean adversity? You mean your free throw percentage dropped, or you didn't get the minutes that you wanted, or your assist numbers were down? That's not adversity. That's just like, that's challenge, I guess. What I try to do, and I try to provide the perspective that, adversity is losing a limb, or adversity is cancer. Adversity is a car wreck. Adversity is like, the major challenges that we face in our life. The adversity is the loss of a loved one, or something along those lines. What I try to portray is like, there's people out there who have legitimate struggles, and to label something as mundane as a drop in free throw percentage as adversity really kind of sells life short, I think, in some cases. So I think if you can if you can scale what your perception of adversity is, it makes things really easy. Like for me, having the challenges that I've had in my life, little challenges like what other people would call adversity, it's so much easier. So I try to challenge people's perception of what adversity is and what it isn't, and learn that it could be a lot worse. And if you look at it that way, the daily struggles that you face are generally pretty easy. Then as far as resilience, I have a lot of thoughts on resilience, and I remember, I've been doing the motivational speaking gig for quite a while, and I go around and people will tell me that they're impressed by my level of resilience, and like they're really impressed with how quickly I bounced back. And I didn't necessarily like that comment, and it took me a while, and I was reading this book by Eric Greitens about resilience, and he proposed an alternate definition of resilience, and that instead of bouncing back or like this elastic form of resilience, he proposed that resilience was something that was non-elastic, something that was dynamic, something like resilience means making the deliberate choice to thrive in any environment. So I look at it in my life, like I didn't bounce back to original form. I'm not trying to be the person that I was. I left behind Brad Snyder, the explosive ordnance disposal officer. That guy's, he's not the same person as I am now. I had some challenges, I had some struggles, I adapted, and I pivoted, and I changed, and I transformed, and now I am who I am now. I loved that definition. So resilience to me now is like learning to accept the circumstances within which you find yourself and deciding to thrive anyway. I'm not trying to be the person that I was. I understand that in any given moment, all of us are different than the person that we were in the previous moment, right? Like every moment that we have to be here is an opportunity to grow and develop, to learn new things, to become wiser, stronger, whatever, and to try to always return to some neutral form, it doesn't necessarily make sense. You guys were talking in the beginning about like this kind of the continuum of athleticism. Like you're always trying to become better. You're always trying to learn new things, to become more flexible, or to be able to do a thing you weren't able to do before. So I like that definition of resilience more, deciding to thrive regardless of circumstance and always become better.
So Brad, you're on that vein of resilience. We field a lot of questions either over email or phone or on our message boards. And one of the things before we can provide any sort of guidance, we have to understand context. And the question that we ask is, what are you training for? And one of the most cliche answers what we're obviously looking for is like football or I'm a volleyball player. But oftentimes we come across people who are quote unquote training for life, and it's become a bit cliche. Like that's just kind of a default answer. Now, going through and using the terminology we discovered, going through the adversity that you underwent, you truly had to train for life. I mean, the things that were second nature now become almost a skill practice for you, like you had mentioned, putting toothpaste on a toothbrush. Did you follow any specific process or chunking model? We refer to that as being, breaking things down in the most fundamental tasks, mastering the fundamentals, and then combining the fundamentals to create more of a complex task, whether it's a power clean or a back squat or something like that. But can you take us through that kind of retraining process and getting back into, whatever groove you found to get through your daily, daily habits?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I have a couple different thoughts on that. But I would say, like, going back to my time in the Navy, our job as explosive ordnance disposal technicians it's like really complex and varied. Like an explosive hazard could be anywhere. It could be at the bottom of the ocean. It could be buried in Afghanistan. It could be, a bomb that got dropped and didn't go off. So like we're always doing something different. You're always learning a new skill set all the time, and that knowledge base changes all the time. And you always start from square zero. You start at the fundamental. You start at the easiest thing, and you work your way to complex, the complex skill sets or whatever. Just like you said, and it always builds on itself. You get used to that process in little blocks. You start, you walk, you crawl, you run. And you do it in all different arenas, and you learn how that process replicates itself over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if you're trying to take out a Connex box with a skill saw or if you are trying to do a deadlift. Like You start at the very smallest base and you work your way up to the more complex aspect of it. I got inundated with that kind of that challenge mindset while I was in the Navy, and I kind of looked at blindness the same way. But when you're faced with the task of like, how do I become good at life as a blind person? You can't do that all at once. Like I can't just click a switch and be adjusted. I have to do it. I had to do it one step at a time. I always use that like stupid Everest thing. Like how did the guy get to the top of Everest? He did it one step at a time. For me, when I was in the hospital, the very first thing I wanted to do was get the wean off of the painkillers so I could take the IV out of my arm. And once I could take the IV out of my arm, I could start to move around my room. And once I could move around my room, I could learn how to micro navigate. And then they gave me a cane, and then I could walk down the hallway. Once I could walk down the hallway, I could figure out how to walk around the hospital. And then challenge just works that way, and you build off of the easy step at the beginning, and you just work your way up one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. And I've been blind now for 4 years, and there's still a lot of skills that I'm not really that good at. But if I juxtapose myself now to what I was capable of in the hospital in Walter Reed, it's staggering, and it's really kind of it gives you a lot of confidence, I guess, to say like, wow, look how far I've come. So I think that it's critically important that you have that kind of you have that in mind, right? You have those small goals that what is the most basic thing, and then what is the target I'm shooting for? It gets into goal setting. I think if you say that your goal is just to be good at life, that's not an effective goal. It's almost a lazy goal. It's just saying I want to be good at life. Well, okay, don't we all? That's pretty easy to say. Let's dial in on it. Do you want to be good at football? And if you want to be good at football, what specifically do you want to be good at? Do you want to be fast? Do you want to be strong? Do you want to be all of the above? What particular skill sets do you want to be able to do? And I think having those defined goals is really critically important. I was talking to my swim coach this morning about the importance of purpose in everything we do. I aim to have a purpose for everything I do because, we're all very busy. We're all trying to do a whole bunch of different things between podcasts and books and working out and, succeeding on an international level, all that sort of stuff. If you're doing something without a purpose behind it, it's wasted effort. Why are you doing that? If you don't understand why you're doing it, it's a wasted effort. So having those goals set in advance and understand what you're trying to do, it's really critically important. So everything that I'm doing is contributing towards an eventual goal, whether it's starting my own company, whether it's succeeding in Rio next year, or if it's I just want to be a good person. So I'm reading this book about, how John was talking about how he wants to be a good dad. I want to be a good dad. I also want to be an athlete. I also want to be doing all these other things. You make sure you know those goals in advance so that every movement that you're making is contributing to one of those goals. In the military, we have this kind of concept called economy of motion. When we're moving around with our weapons, if I'm going to be moving for my pistol, I want to be moving my body in a way that I don't waste any movement at all, because any wasted movement is wasted time. And when you're trying to draw a pistol on an enemy who may be shooting at you as well, you don't want to waste any time because it might mean at the end of your life. You know what I mean? So I'm really big on purpose-driven everything, whether it's in athletics or just life in general.
So out of curiosity, and then after this I'll springboard it more towards kind of the performance side of it. You talked about the chunking of navigating the room in a micro manner and then moving up from there. Was that just an intuitive process for you? Was that something that just from your experience in the Navy you knew that you had to kind of take this one bite at a time, or was that something that you were mentored or coached from a specialist?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. I'd say it's kind of a combination of the three things you listed. One thing I've been inundated with between sports, this idea of just swimming's a weird, where we have basically 6-month cycles. You work, your volume comes really up at the beginning of the 6 months, and you eventually work down to a taper. Then that's when you shave and you swim as fast as you can, and then you iterate, and you do that over and over and over again. So that's one kind of chunk, and that's something I've been doing since I was 11. So understanding that kind of process is something I've been ingrained with from an athletic standpoint from the beginning. And then, like I said, in the Navy, in the military's way of teaching is really, I would say, that way. it's an effective way to teach because it's kind of like it's like drinking from the fire hose. We want you to learn this as quick as possible, so here's the appropriate way for you to get all of this crazy information and learn these complex skill sets, but learn it very quickly. You have to start from the very basic part, and then you work your way up to the complex part. Like free fall training. Free fall training's like in 4 weeks you go from never having jumped out of an airplane to I can jump out of an airplane with oxygen, a weapon, a rucksack tied to my legs, and I can also do a backflip while I'm in the air. Like, in 4 weeks you learn those skills, and that's just you start very basically jumping out with 2 people on either side, and then you work your way up jump by jump. It becomes more and more complex. Having gone through all those sorts of things, especially in the Navy, and especially with high-stakes stuff like jumping out of aircraft and then dismantling explosives, I really did look at blindness as a new challenge. I'll also add, though, like while you're in that environment, being detrimented the way you are, like I woke up in the hospital really unable to move effectively for the beginning part of it. You're kind of forced to be into that situation. Like the very first thing I really want to do is I just have to go to the bathroom, so I have to figure out my way to the bathroom. It's almost like a necessity thing in that particular environment to just start from the most basic part and then work your way up. But I would say like I was conditioned to it from athletics. It was reiterated in the military, and then it was largely a function of survival for the beginning part of how that I was inundated with that kind of challenge mindset. But then later on, in retrospect, I kind of see how that all worked, and then now I try to apply that to my current life in more of a deliberate manner as opposed to something that's kind of just happening to me.
So let's talk about that process then, jumping back into the pool. I mean, you obviously you knew what to expect from your youth experience as a swimmer, but what were the challenges that you faced, and how'd you overcome them when you jumped back in the pool the first time?
I think the biggest thing I had to adapt to was this idea of crashing. So like it's really easy for me, having been a swimmer before, I know all the movements, I know how to do it, I know the kind of the tactics of the races and everything, so I have this great foundation. I've worked up from that level 0 to the complexities of being able to swim, a very competitive 400-meter race or whatever. Then add the complexity of being able to do it without my vision, and the biggest part of that is just navigating the right way. And if I don't navigate, or sometimes when I'm racing real fast, I actually kind of forget that I'm blind. I'm really focused on the movement, I'm focused on moving fast. I forget that there's a lane line on either side, and if I don't go the right way, I'm going to smack into that lane line and effectively lose speed and maybe smash my face or something along those lines. So I'm going to try to avoid that as much as possible. Learning how to get up to speed and be able to navigate that way was my biggest challenge, and still remains to be my biggest challenge as a blind swimmer. And I had to adapt some of the movements. I had to find ways that on my arm recovery, I'm looking for the lane line. And then going back to resilience, I had to find ways to, once inevitably I'm going to crash at some point or another. I have to find a way to not lose my head and get out of that crash as quick as possible and get back up to speed. So be able to adapt within the race. So it was something, something that was pretty challenging at first and actually kind of scary, especially given the fact that, in September of 2011, I basically took a 40-pound blast to the face. By February, I'm now trying to sprint across a pool, and the leading edge of my body is largely my face. So I'm really nervous to hit a lane line in a place where I had just had major surgery. But I found ways to. I had a lot of coaching advice and a lot of open-mindedness. Adaptive sports is really cool because everyone looks at something that an able-bodied athlete does, and we all know exactly, at this particular point, we have got a lot of data and hundreds of years of human movement and knowledge to work on how an able-bodied person is supposed to do these sorts of things for maximum output. Well, now we have to look at it a little bit different in the adaptive world. Maybe someone's missing a leg, maybe they're missing 2, maybe they're missing a hand or whatever. In my world, it was like, how do I find the lane line and still be up to speed? And I had some coaches who helped work with me on ways to bring my hands down but optimize my pull, and also learn to just be aware of the water flowing across my body and being as symmetrical as possible, and learn to feel when I'm veering off course, which sounds kind of crazy, I think. And sometimes I can tell and sometimes I can't, but that really just sometimes that's on me to just be present in the moment and feel feel my body as opposed to thinking about other things, thinking about my stroke count or thinking about the race or thinking about the crowd or any of those things. I sometimes just have to think about the feel of the water flow across my body.
You know, Brad, we had a chance to talk with another adaptive athlete, Travis Pollan, who's also a Paralympic swimmer. I'm surprised that your paths haven't crossed yet, and maybe they will. But during that conversation with him, we got on topic about the approach to training like an adaptive athlete, and how the difference between rehabbing the injured veteran or the injured athlete and like prehabbing, right? And not walking on eggshells and challenging this particular athlete to get them to take it to the next level. And I'd like to hear like your thoughts on how, your opinion on how a coach can take, the steps to provide that kind of environment for these athletes.
Yeah, man. I'm probably on the wrong side of the scale. Sometimes I err much more on the challenge side. Like, I let the athlete tell you when they've gone too far, or like let the athlete tell you what they're capable of. Sometimes I err on the side of it's the coach's job to push them as hard as possible. I've seen way too many cases. Granted, my experience is largely relegated to the wounded vet world, and then most para athletes that I come across have been doing this for a really long time, and they know exactly the extent of their limitations and capabilities, and they can articulate that to a coach. But in the wounded vet community, I think it's up to they're all coming from a hospital environment where an OT or an RT or a whatever T is going to be telling them exactly what they can and can't be doing on a stump, let's say. By the time they're getting to you, a strength and conditioning coach out at a CrossFit gym or wherever, they should be well aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing. It's up to you to provide them the challenge, I think, and then just look at creative ways to find ways to like enable them to do whatever movement it is that they want to do. So a great example is, I think near UTEX at CrossFit Rubicon out in Northern Virginia, they have the Working Wounded Games, and there's a girl there who's missing her hand, but they've been able to use like ankle straps and chains so that she can link up to a barbell and she can actually clean and she can do a whole bunch of different big movements with the barbell without being able to actually grip it with her hand. And it took a coach to look at that problem with an open mind and say, well, why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? I think that's like the prevalent mindset in my world is, why not try it? What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get hurt again. All right, well, we go back to the rehab setting. But I think challenge is the most important thing, especially within the wounded vet community, is find a way to tell them that, like, to focus on what they have and tell them that they can do something versus saying, like, well, you're missing your leg, so you obviously can't squat a barbell. Like, that's not necessarily true. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's up to the athlete and the coach to work together to find out what they can and can't do.
Do you have any can you compare or contrast any of the coaches that you personally have been involved with pre and post blindness? Anything stick out? Anybody really
just to jump on that, Denny. There are, I guess, universal traits of you're the best coach you've had. Leadership, walks the walk, integrity. Is there anything? Have you found in your experience that those who coach able-bodied athletes or those who don't coach able-bodied athletes or working with adaptive athletes need an extra skill set or an extra tool in their toolbox to be a really successful coach for an adaptive athlete?
I'd say the first point of it, like the people that I find that I want to work for or I will follow, it goes back like to just blanket leadership. What's my theory on leadership? I think I'm big on compassion-driven leadership. My coach here, Brian Leffler at Loyola, he's not a coach who's going to yell at you. He's not a coach who's going to run up and across the pool screaming and yelling and throwing stuff. There are a lot of swim coaches who are that way. And they they're effective at getting athletes to do something almost out of fear. Like, I'm afraid of my coach. I'm afraid he's going to yell, so I'm going to do this, to not get in trouble. Like that, you can lead through fear. You can lead through yelling and that sort of stuff. But I think it's so much more effective to lead through compassion. I know my coach is really wholly invested in my eventual success. Like he would bend over backwards to make sure that I had every resource to make sure that I was able to succeed. Every practice he's there, and when he's got his stopwatch out counting my splits, he's really very tied to me. He's compassionate. He really wants to be there with me, and he wants to, like, he is just involved. He's invested. He is in it for me to succeed. I want to succeed because I want to make him happy, because I respect him, because he's invested in me. Going back to compassionate-driven leadership, that was like my theory with any team that I had. I was the officer in charge of 2 different platoons, one to Iraq and one to Afghanistan. It was critically important for me to demonstrate to my guys that I was there for them. My number one job is to make sure that all of them are provided the tools, the equipment, and the training they need to succeed and come home alive. That's my number one job. I have a whole list of other mission objectives that I'm held responsible and accountable for, but my number one job is to make sure that my boys come home alive. And they knew that. I think they knew that. And I think that I earned their respect through that compassion-driven leadership. I didn't necessarily need to be the best bomb tech. I didn't necessarily need to be the biggest, strongest, most yelly kind of guy out there. They knew that I was wholly invested in them, and because of that, I was their brother, and they were going to work for me out of respect versus me ordering them to do one thing or another. So I'd say any coach that I've ever really felt a bond with was that, like, kind of, I respected them, and I respected them out of this understood compassion. And then tactics that allow a coach to succeed in the para world is like an open mind, being able to look at movement for the sake of movement. You guys are all really, really good at that. The way that you talk about the fundamentals of movement and looking at certain things and being able to understand how to optimize for a certain lift or a certain movement or like a muscle up or whatever it is. You got to look at the fundamentals and understand that the way that a person's going to move with only one arm is completely different. But instead of saying, you just really can't do that, why don't you wait on the side while everyone else does it? Like, let's find a way to adapt to that. Let's use straps, or let's use rubber bands, or let's just completely adapt the movement. Instead of doing a muscle up, you're going to do banded pull-ups or something along those lines. That's one of the things I've really liked about CrossFit is there's always a way to scale. There's always a way to look at a movement or do something differently, even for able-bodied folks, and then that also translates well into adaptive sports as well, is having an open mind.
I think this is a good transition to kind of get into your new style of dryland training and how that compared to what you did in college. I mean, if you had a solid program in college, and just kind of walk us through, do y'all use machines? Is it trunk? You still get a barbell on your back, or how's it work?
Yeah, so I just basic history on my weightlifting mentality in college. Back when I was in college in 2002 to 2006, I think the latent mindset in swimming was still just volume, 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 volume. My aim was to become better by just swimming more than everybody else. And then, of course, you're trying to bring your 100 repeats or whatever down, but my overall goal was just to get as much yardage in as possible. We'd probably be swimming somewhere in the realm of, at times up to 17,000 meters a day, just to have more volume than everybody else. And then by the time we got to the weight room, swimmers are so, like my shoulders were so loose at that particular point, I think loading them would have been really dangerous. So we did really, really kind of, I would just say our weight room mentality was kind of negligible. We went in ceremoniously and did some weights, but I don't think it really translated to the pool anywhere. Then I retired swimming in 2006 and moved into longer endurance athletics, Ironman triathlons and stuff like that, and then got into CrossFit when I was with when I got that job to work with the SEALs, because I'm carrying a lot of armor in my rucksack and my helmet and all that sort of stuff, and I need to be able to do my job. I need to be able to think effectively, and I need to be able to hike long distances with heavy weight. I thought the best routine there was to do something functional fitness wise, being able to just enhance my ability to do my job by lifting weight and doing it in a way it's hitting the different metcons or whatever. now it's been cool to come back to swimming with that experience and see how effective functional fitness is as far as the different movements in swimming. Swimming's a unique sport in that even in just a 100-meter freestyle, there's a lot of different movements between the start, the flip, and then the rotational, the stroke, like my pull from my right to my left side. There's a lot of different movements there, and I think they're really all very much enhanced by Olympic lift and especially focus on core. And then like anything you can do from kind of like the gymnastic standpoint, being able to do pull-ups into muscle-ups especially is the best mimic for a swim pull. So I'm actually working with the folks over at Under Armour at designing for lack of a better term, a curriculum, a dryland curriculum that's going to really be focused on translating, generating strength through weights and then translating that into the water. And there's kind of like 3 different vectors that they have over there. There's mobility, then there's strength, and then there's just recovery as well. And so focusing on those 3 different aspects on the dry land with the goal of translating strength to the water in a way that's not going to be a detriment. If you just go out and if you just bench, every day for 6 months, you probably get really good at bench, but it's decreasing my ability to be flexible with my shoulders and all that sort of stuff. So we're trying to find ways to increase strength without decreasing flexibility is probably the biggest approach.
Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, have you ever heard of a guy named Rafael Ruiz?
Yeah, that's the first podcast of yours I listened to, and I was really, it was interesting. He said things like nobody's really done an effective job. I won't say nobody. I don't know what I don't know, but aside from him and a few others, nobody's really put a lot of legwork towards connecting the dots from load on the dry land to the water. And what he had to say I thought was really interesting, especially that idea of like dynamic flexibility. Like the way he was talking about one of his swimmers in the 200 fly and how that guy is really good to the 150 mark, but it's because of flexibility that he fatigues at the latter part of his race. And that echoed with me for sure. I definitely, I've had a lot of races that way myself, and I think that it definitely resonated with me in a big way.
Years ago we had a pretty interesting deal where we had some yoga people come in and training with us, and what was amazing was that they were very flexible in terms of passive range of motion, but yet had no flexibility if we looked at like active range of motion, for example. They were all, great at their yoga poses as they were nice and relaxed, and you put some form of load on them, like whether it be a barbell back squat or even anything that could press, and they had so little flexibility under load that it kind of took me back and kind of scratched my head a little bit and realized I'm like, this idea of, flexibility under load, dynamic flexibility versus passive range of motion, and it kind of really started thinking where, if you're going to be doing something that looks like stretching, it has to be something done in a dynamic way. Just passively working on range of motion doesn't really help us unless we're trying to get better at yoga, and I think, that's why almost something like Pilates works very well, but we've had a ton of athletes try to go down the yoga train with like, I'm going to do yoga to increase my flexibility, and I'm like, I'd much rather see you squat heavy and be able to get to full range of motion under load than basically being able to go into a hot room in your underwear and do a whole bunch of stretches. So it kind of fit. And, I've known Ralph for years, and we've trained together forever. I mean, as long as I've been in this game. And the work he's doing with the swimmers is pretty amazing. And he even talked about it on his podcast where these guys are so naturally talented that a big part of their strength stuff is like, let's just not fuck them up. And, now he's down there where he's actually making differences. So, we'd love to plug you in with him, and I'm sure you'd have a great conversation. And, Rob is by far one of the most interesting giving guys I've met, but also actually likes to call him the League of Shadows.
And creative, though. I mean, extremely creative.
Well, he's, what's interesting about Rolf is Rolf's work will not be really understood until he'll be like a great artist, where like these guys are like, don't have a nickel to buy a bottle of wine for their work, and then all of a sudden they pass away and their paintings sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. So Rob's in that same light where his stuff is, and everybody on this podcast is had an opportunity to work and to listen to Rob speak. I mean, he's a really, really high level, and he does a lot of stuff when he was down in Tampa working with the guys from Naval Special Warfare. And I was going to ask, do you know Alex Sonnenberg?
No, that I haven't run across him.
Yeah, he was an EOD guy that I met. He was, out at Dam Neck, and I knew him from San Diego, and he actually took me out to El Centro, and we got to actually blow off some ordnance. So it was pretty fun. He taught me how to pack C4 and go out there and blow up a bunch of stuff. It was pretty awesome. So that was my great experience with the guys from EOD.
Yep, yeah, that's an old wheelhouse. Yep, and it's neat. Like the EOD community and the SEAL community as well are very tight knit, and there's a lot. It was tough to leave because it is such a cool brotherhood and everything. But what's neat is every time I go back down to Virginia Beach, we go back to the same old places, and it's all the same guys, and it's great to catch up with them, and it's a unique brotherhood, and very prideful to be a part of that brotherhood for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, Brad, I was gonna tell you the CrossFit gym that I coach at is CrossFit UXO. So the owner's
that's awesome.
Former, he's a bomb guy. When I told him that I was gonna be talking to you, he was like, "Oh yeah, I know him. He's friends with my EOD brother Joe Bland."
Yeah.
Joe Bland?
Yeah, I know Joe.
Cool, man. Yeah, so the guy who owns this gym, his name is Jason Houston. So when we launch this show to the masses, I'll definitely send it to him so he can check it out, man. I'm sure he'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, that'd be great, man. That'd be great.
All right. That's pretty much an hour, guys. I mean, we want to start wrapping this show up. How can people kind of get a hold of you, Brad? And what social media or like websites and stuff you want to put out there for us?
I'm Brad Snyder USA across the board. I'm doing my best to tweet and Facebook. I'm not the most savvy social media. I'm certainly not like you guys, but I'm working on it as much as possible. But I'm real excited about next year and the Paralympics. It's the first time that NBC has decided to invest in us and put us on prime time. So we're actually going to be on TV next fall, and I'm really excited about it. I think a lot of people are going to see some really inspirational performances by the athletes in the para world. It's really incredible. I think, when you watch the Olympics, one of the things they like to do is do these kind of like, profiles on the athlete and tell this great story. Well, what's great about the Paralympics is that every athlete has just an incredible story, whether there's a guy who's an Italian race car driver who is now paralyzed and now is a hand cyclist, and other athletes who are maybe born without legs and things like that, and you really see what they're capable of, and I think it's inspirational, and it provides a lot of that perspective we were talking about as far as adapting your scale of adversity and things like that. So I'm excited to have as many people with us on that journey as possible, and I really thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to come out and chat with you for a while.
That's great. It's so empowering. We had a client at Balboa who was born without a hand, and I remember the first day she came in, we rigged her up this deal with a strap and a hook, and I remember watching her do pull-ups and basically pushing up on her, I guess you call it the nub or the stub.
Uh-huh.
And it was pretty amazing having to rig everything for her, and never once complained about it, and never once ever said anything. And it was kind of awesome when just watching her kick people's asses. Where people come in and be like, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm having a problem." I'm like,
you just kind of point and be like,
"We have a lady who's missing a hand, who's like a mother of two, who's crushing your life with in her time. Even I got to go strap an apparatus on her hand."
Uh-huh.
And I think it's just, it's not only it's empowering, but it's also a firm kick in the nuts and the balls or the ass for most people, where you're like, "Hey man, your day wasn't really that bad. Let's go."
Yeah, it's that perspective that Brad's talking about. So
which is
recalibrate that a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm stoked to see that. I mean, it's I'm be the first one to watch. I think that's incredible, and it's about time.
Brad, you also said you had a book coming out?
Yeah, I just finished the manuscript. We're working with the editor right now, but it's going to come out, I think, late next summer, like August timeframe. It's going to be called Fire in My Eyes. So, along with, I told it in a narrative style, just telling you right on my back as I had all those experiences. But the whole point of it was to deliver some of those lessons, talking about the power of community and perspective, and making a deliberate decision to be a positive person, and being aware of the effect that you're having on the community is something I wanted to drive home. So it was a stressful process. I'm sure you guys have been through all that sort of stuff, but it was fun, and I'm really proud of the manuscript we have in our hands right now. So I'm excited for that to come out next summer.
Yeah, awesome. And you're just in Baltimore, so you're a drive away from me, so we'll definitely have to connect up there.
Yeah, we'll get through the holidays with the family and the cookies and all that sort of stuff, and then we'll wake up afterwards.
So many cookies are coming.
The cookies already started.
No, not me. I'm paleo.
Oh God! I was sitting there. I was like, no. Like my wife has a cookie party for our kids. Like it's like a deal for the school. They have to have like this. Like I don't even know what a cookie party is.
There's a bunch of cookies, and it's amazing.
I was like, so what is a cookie party? She's like, just like what it sounds. It's a bunch of little girls making cookies with their moms, and then they eat them. I'm like, okay, I'm not totally going to that. And you go get a hotel room because those kids are gonna be crazy. But my wife was making brownies, and last night I'm like, what is that smell? And I walked out, and there was just brownies and cookies everywhere. I'm like,
that's why I didn't come in.
Did you have cookie hangover this morning?
No, the reason I come in is because I've been on this 12-pack smoking deal for the last 12 days. No, I somehow I got like ninja blow darted with something my kids brought home, and mid at the symposium, all of a sudden I lost my voice, and then I've been waking up every day feeling like somebody's been like
shit run over twice.
Oh, dude, like somebody's punching me in the throat. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So these guys give me a bad time. I missed workout a couple times this week.
Yeah.
Oh, you're at home eating cookies. I'm like, I wish.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to throw that out at you guys. That would be a really interesting podcast. Like, I just got sick last week, and I was thinking, as I was listening to you guys, I was like, it'd be cool to talk to an expert on, like, how do you recover from illness in the most optimum way? I was thinking, like, if I go to practice today, am I going to set myself back, or should I push through it, or what are some good guidelines on that?
It kind of, and I actually did that. I texted Dr. Tom, and I was like, Tom, how do I get rid of this? And so he sent me like a list of all these different supplements. The big thing is if you compromise your immune system, it's going to take longer and longer for you to get better. So you have to try to remove some things that compromise immune function, try to add some things. And if you can, go get a high-dose vitamin C is what he recommended.
Yeah,
so
sleep.
I can go over and then sleep, obviously being the big deal. Don't go to bed late, and just kind of some of the little things like drink plenty of water, and don't get all boozed up. And
what? It's the holidays. Eggnog.
Right, but I mean, even like some of the compromise. And Tom was also, hey, have you eaten anything out of the ordinary that you don't really eat?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think we did, have that. And he's like, well, anytime you have changes in diet, changes in sleep, all of a sudden you're around a whole bunch of people that you aren't normally around, or you have kids that go home and bring home God knows what from school. For the most part, I'm always fine. But I think for some reason they just ninja blow darted me, and now I'm done. So
sleep, hydration, tons of vitamin C.
And I'm gonna lick Luke and Fisher's face here in a few minutes.
No.
Just like Rick James. It's a big lick right across the face.
No, sir. Stay on that reach. All right, guys. No, thanks a lot, guys. It was a great show.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, Brad. Thanks, man.
Thank you guys so much.
Merry Christmas.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. Follow Brad Snyder's training and life on Instagram at Brad Snyder USA. You can also read about his amazing story and motivational speaking opportunities on his website, www.bradsnyderusa.com. I encourage you to share this episode with friends and family, especially during the holiday season. Merry Christmas to everyone from Power Athlete HQ, and until next time, bye!